whereas the BRM P25 in its early days, not the one that Gary Pearson's driving, the sort of early version of that same car, very quick but incredibly unreliable, all sorts of problems, usually with the brakes. So by the time you get to 1957, the BRM really still hasn't quite delivered on its promise, and the Vanwall starts to, with a formidable driver lineup led by Sterling Moss and Tony Brooks. And Brooks was injured, wasn't he, for the 1957 British Grand Prix, having had a crash at Le Mans. And so he was running further down than you would normally expect. I think he was about 6th when he brought the car in to hand over to Stirling, who then came out even further down.
Different times.
Yeah, yes. You can't really imagine that now, can you?
Exactly not.
And Moss put on one of his, you have to say, not irregular comeback drives. If you make a list of comeback drives in motorsport, there would be a lot of Moss entries on it, and that would be one of them.
The Vanwall sitting really proud. So quite a stately, high-riding eye-line from that car. Well taller than the Connaught made in Surrey.
Quite a bit more tricky to drive than the 250F, which was always well known as a well-balanced car. But I think by 57, the Vanwall was probably becoming the quicker car, although possibly not on the tricky circuits such as the Nürburgring.
The 250Fs, of which there were quite a number, weren't there? Probably sort of 30-ish in total, and they did morph chassis numbers into chassis numbers. Were interesting because they were available to pecunious customers, and so they had to have a degree of balance in them that would be appreciated by decent drivers, but not the sort of top liners.
And yet they were appreciated by the top liners, of course.
Very much so.
The only drivers to actually win World Championship Grand Prix in a 250F were Fangio and Moss. So,
but they flattered the customer too, which is always good. So they're coming up onto the grid. Great to see. Sandy Willis in 28, as I do know. That's Will Nuttall. You saw in there. That's Willis. Andy Willis, who raced an AC Cobra at Zandvoort last weekend. A lot of these guys have come straight here from Zandvoort. We'll go on to Spa next weekend. But that's a fabulous sight, isn't it? There's the Lancia-Ferrari.
Yeah, so it's at Aintree in 57. It was Mike Hawthorne, wasn't it, in I think second place, chasing John Barrow's Maserati with Moss on his charge. I think he got up to 4th, catching Stuart Lewis Evans in a 3rd Vanwall. Back in the day when Grand Prix teams had more than 2 cars. And then Barrow's Maserati broke. Hawthorne went over the debris, got a puncture, and pretty much at the same time Moss went past Lewis Evans. So he went from 4th to 1st. In quite a short space of time, and it was touch and go as to whether he was going to get the lead anyway. But yeah, that's I think he had another stop after that actually to have a quick drink and a top up once the hard job was done. And it was the first British driver to win the Grand Prix in a British car.
In that car, in the. Yes, there's Nuttall going away in Jeffrey O'Neill's ex-factory car. Sending out on this demo there. It's just a great opportunity to see these cars. See some front-engine Grand Prix cars come out later on in the Richmond Trophy race, Richmond Gordon Trophy race.
So is Rob Hall being made to start at the back so that he can storm through the field within the Vanwall?
Just about showing the cars off. There's the V8 Lancia-Ferrari. Difference in concept to the straight 6 engines in the Maseratis and the 4-cylinder engines in the Cooper. Sterling Moss won the first Grand Prix in a Cooper, and also won the first Grand Prix, well, therefore with a Climax engine, also won the first one for in a Lotus as well, way before the factory team Lotus themselves won a race, and that was right through in the 61, wasn't it?
Yes, and of course the first season of the Constructors World Championship was won by Vanwall in 1958, but they weren't ready for the first round in Argentina, which is why Moss had the Rob Walker Cooper, and in another one of his great underdog drives managed to go through non-stop while all the bigger Italian cars made a tyre change, and by the time they realised it was too late and he held on to win.
He was running on the canvas, wasn't he, on the tyres?
He was going through patches of oil to try to keep the tyres in one piece.
Just amazing. All very slightly different, the T50Fs, aren't they? There's evolutions of them. There's the Piccolo cars. There's the you'll see the ultimate evocation of the T50F, the Tech-Neck Racing later in the day. There's the BRM with that air scoop over the nose. Gary Pearson in it. I think I'm right in saying that was the car that Amshel Rothschild raced for quite a long time in historics. Ended up with Spencer Flack. Sadly lost his life in an accident at Phillip Island in Australia in 2003.
Garrett's had his car a while now, hasn't he? He's raced it a lot, won quite a lot with it too.
He has.
One thing I'd like to throw in the mix, it's definitely brightening up, no longer raining. I don't know how it is at your corner of the circuit, but right out here at St Mary's, it's brightening by the minute. So that's good news for these absolutely glorious cars from Can It Really Be 60 years ago. Still kicking up the spray, but it's getting brighter. So certainly for those looking to take photographs, it's a moody scene all the same with this mixed light, but it's on the brightening end of the scale. That is good news.
Very, very brisk wind coming from your direction of the circuit, the far side of the circuit, Bruce. Chris Stewart's just popped the window open, and we've had this huge, great influx of air.
Yes, you're right about the 250S, Mark, because they're all slightly different bodyweight. My personal favourite is the 57 cars, actually, in particular the Nürburgring Fangio car, I think was when it was aesthetically at its best.
Whether all those pannier tanks on the Lancia-Ferrari actually brought any downforce into the equation, looks like they probably ought to.
I think part of the thinking behind it was to try and balance out the weight as the fuel load came off, that you didn't get a shift in balance.
It stayed within the wheelbase.
Absolutely, and as I say, really, it, in some ways, it was. In some respects, it was better than W196 Mercedes, but it was run by, say, a company without the financial clout that Mercedes. This sounds familiar. Without the financial clout of Mercedes-Benz in Grand Prix racing.
And on the opposite side of the tail, on the left-hand side of the tail, it's got its Prova number, the sort of registration number, which allowed it to run on the road.
You can't really imagine that, can you? by 57, actually, Ferrari developed the D50 quite a lot, and I think they'd even done away with moved the fuel tanks around a bit, and didn't win a race. It wasn't until the Dino came along in 58 that Ferrari really sort of got back on terms with the British constructors like Vanwall.
Solid crossweight in the Cooper with the oil coolers under the nose.
Really looks incongruous in this company, doesn't it, the Cooper? And it's a sort of a hint as to what is to come.
Yeah, Kevin, a hint of what was to come, but a hint that Ferrari most certainly didn't take, did they? Carrying on until 1960 with the engine at the front. No, it wasn't something that Enzo Ferrari wanted to do, was it? Put the engine behind the driver, but then of course ironically when he did, it was when the 1.5 litre regulations came in and all the British constructors were too busy arguing about that fact and they wanted to stay with 2.5, and none of them were really ready for 61, so Ferrari dominated and probably would have won every race had it not been for a couple of virtuoso races by Moss in privateer
Lotuses.
And I think as when the 3-litre formula came in for 66, I think Ferrari had crowed about the power that its engines were giving on the brake, on the dynamometers, and everyone else ran scared, didn't they? And thought, oh no, we're way behind. Of course, when they came out, they really weren't.
No, that's right. And Jack Brabham's rather more practical approach.
Very pragmatic with that rather low power, but ultra light and ultra reliable Repco V8 engine based on the Oldsmobile.
Very nice to see the Vanwall out on track. Whereas we see 250S racing, you don't really see Vanwalls racing. There's very few of them around, aren't there now, Marcus?
Colin Chapman was sort of drawn into the Vanwall project, wasn't he?
He was, yes. Early days before, or I guess he would probably still have been penning the Lotus 16 at some point while still working for Vanwall. I should imagine.
We'll see some 16s later in the day. But it was the Lotus 12 that took Lotus into Grand Prix racing, essentially a Formula 2 type car. But the Lotus 16 actually gave them a wheelier car.
Probably worth mentioning as well that down in the paddock there's a short-nosed Vanwall, and they used that configuration for Monaco because the long nose was a little bit tricky for such a tight circuit. And Tony Brooks drove what I think he regards as one of his best drives, chasing Fangio around Monaco with a gearbox that wasn't quite right, and but I think he got a rollicking from the team manager for not passing him, which I think he thought was rather harsh.
People used to think that the short noses were specifically for cooling, but sometimes actually make a little bit more leeway between yourself and the barriers, such as they were. The furniture, maybe the street furniture.
Well, Fangio always used to say he preferred to see the wheels, didn't he? He didn't get on with the streamliner when he was at Mercedes-Benz.
Hence he clomped the oil drums, etc. at Silverstone.
He did get some famous pictures of it all dented at the front, which was very un-Fangio-like.
So this celebration of the 1957 Grand Prix season, and just the little tweaks that make the cars look different, but really they didn't know at the time. These were the dying days for the engines at the front. Obviously the Cooper in there was starting to mix it all up, but great to see these cars out on the track. The Type 25 PRM, just such a beautiful looking car. I mean, lots of people absolutely eulogise about the Maserati 250F, but I think the P25, just to my mind, as good looking, tucked in behind. Very similar look at the treatment.
I think I'd agree with you, Bruce.
Sorry? So very similar in so many ways. This teardrop shape. The Connaught's a little more lumpy, and then the D50. Doesn't matter how it looks. I think it looks very interesting with those pannier tanks, but it's the sound the T50 makes that really makes it stand out. And if it's your first time at the Goodwood Revival, isn't the sound of a racing engine something that is so super special? And if you're down in the paddock when they fire them up, or the collection area, particularly that D50, what a roar. It's a barbaric sound. So the drivers becoming more comfortable with their cars. Rain now streaming in again at St Mary's. I shouldn't have said it was drying at my part. Spraying against my commentary box windows, but the track actually is not a bad semblance of a dry line, dry-ish line. I suppose it's all comparative. Maybe the dry line is the one that doesn't have puddles on it, merely just wet tarmac. But certainly as we look at the Lancia-Ferrari going around the circuit, rumbling away the D58, what a raucous engine note that is. So back in 1957, of course, you had the work teams, but you had so many privateers, such a feature of Formula One in the day. So you'd have your works liveries, and then you'd have the privateers one. And the 56 we're looking at now is racing in the white and red livery of Monaco. Of course, national racing livery is still such an important part of racing back in those days, before sponsorship was writ upon the flanks, noses and rumps of the cars. So, of course, it makes their body shape look all the more pure than you'd see today, also with no aerodynamic addenda. They were just starting to consider the shape of cars in terms of an aerodynamic element back then, but it really was about the suspension, the tyres and the engine back in the late 1950s. And there's the Vanwall, the most aerodynamic of its era. Certainly the work that cost in to help shape the body. And as we mentioned, Colin Chapman was interested in it too, but a great entry from a British industrialist, Tony Vandervelde, who put endless amounts of money in to make it work, but he did make BRM look rather stupid because he came in and really delivered, whereas BRM had had a lot more money and thrown it at its racing over many more years. But Vanwall came in and got it all very right indeed, and indeed were the first ever Constructors champions in Formula One in 1958. Oh no, there's more rain on my windows. There are more boys in shorts, men in shorts, spraying my windows. Year in, year out, they catch me.
It was a strange year, wasn't it, Bruce, with 57? Because actually that was the last hurrah of Maserati, and of course within 2 years Vanwall had gone as well. So you sort of have this very quick. Finally the Brits got there, but the team that actually did it sort of came, won the championship, and then went after Vanwall withdrew after Stuart Lewis Evans was killed at the final race in 58. And then really Cooper took out Cooper, and then later Lotus took on from there. So Vanwall sort of got the ball rolling, but then weren't around for very long.
No, but anyone studying the history of motor racing in the 1950s will realise what a role the privateers played. But also, as we said, industrialists will come in and, relatively speaking, compared to the stratospheric costs of Formula One today, they could mount a championship challenge, and that certainly brought names and people and places into the whole mix. And I still find those days endlessly interesting, that the people who could be a dentist in Colorado or something, and they could put together a racing team to compete in the World Championship.
You just can't believe that a little Cooper like that could beat these mighty behemoths, could you? Just a spindly little thing with a 4-cylinder Cooper-Climax engine in the back, in the hands of the mighty Stirling Moss, could outrun the 2.5 litre cars.
Well, I don't think Enzo Ferrari could either, which is presumably why it took him so long to decide to put in it and build a rear-engine car.
He must have thought it was just a sort of freaky one-off. So that's Rob Hall in the Vanwall.
And of course Vanwall continued after Aintree in 57, apart from Fangio's famous German Grand Prix victory at the Nürburgring and chased down the Ferraris, where the Vanwalls were pretty appalling and they needed quite a lot of work for Nürburgring the following year. But after that, Moss and Vanwall really outpaced Fangio, who had clinched his 5th and final world title there. And that felt like a bit of a change in the guard, I should imagine, at the time as well. And Moss would have started 58 as championship favourite with Vanwall.
They did try a rear-engine one, didn't they, very briefly?
They did, yes. Yeah, a couple of years later.
Didn't come to much.
I think Tony Brooks had the misfortune of driving that at one stage, didn't he?
Talking rear-engine, these BRM Type 25s, like one on our screen now, number 7, most of them were actually cut up and the frames reused in the Type 48 Grand Prix cars. Will Nuttall in Jeffrey O'Neill's X-Works car. The British cars then, the Cooper, the Connaught, the BRM and the Vanwall in with the Italiana. Italiana, much a theme this year at the Revival meeting. See that great piazza behind the main grandstand opposite the pits, complete with 150 odd Fiat 500s and derivatives. But the Grand Prix cars forming in Crocodile now and coming in to the paddock to go back into their pits. Down on the campus, Zoe has found some bad company, the Goodwood Rockers.